Commander Zeleth's claws gripped the communication console as another explosion rocked the orbital defense platform. The Vorthok raiders had broken through the outer ring, their sleek ships cutting through Kalani defenses like knives. Through paper. Below, on Zarian Prime, 3 million civilians crowded into evacuation ships, their frightened voices filling the communication channels. "Send the distress signal again," Zeleth ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Kalani had always been peaceful miners, not warriors. Their weapons were designed to crack asteroids, not fight off one of the galaxy's most brutal raiding fleets. The communications officer, a young Kalani named Vortex, looked up from his station with worried eyes. "Commander, the Galactic Aid Consortium responded. They're sending a humanitarian fleet. Estimated arrival in 6 hours? Zeleth nodded grimly. 6 hours. They had maybe 2 hours before the Vorthok reached the civilian evacuation zones. The aid consortium would send perhaps 20 ships, maybe 30 if they were lucky. Small, fast vessels designed to evacuate refugees, not fight battles. It would have to be enough. The mining colony had been peaceful for decades.
Kalani
Had chosen this remote system precisely because it was far from the galaxy's conflicts. They dug deep into the planet's crust, extracting rare minerals that powered half the galaxy's technology. They had families here, children who had never seen violence, elderly who remembered the old wars only as distant nightmares. "Hyperspace signatures detected," announced the sensor operator suddenly. "Multiple contacts incoming." Zeleth felt a moment of hope. The aid consortium had sent more ships than expected. Maybe other civilized species had heard their call and responded. The galaxy's great powers often competed, but they usually came together when civilians were threatened. "How many ships?" he asked. The sensor operator's voice became very quiet. "Commander, I'm reading 847 vessels." The command center fell silent. 800 ships. That was impossible. The entire Galactic Aid Consortium fleet had maybe 300 vessels scattered across 50 systems. No humanitarian organization had that many ships in one place. "Sir," the sensor operator continued, his voice shaking, "these aren't aid consortium ships. The energy signatures are completely unknown, and Commander... they're massive. Each one is the size of a battle cruiser." Zeleth stared at the tactical display as the unknown fleet materialized from hyperspace. The ships appeared. In perfect formation, arranged in precise geometric patterns that spoke of military discipline. These weren't the scattered, civilian-crewed vessels of a rescue fleet. These were warships built for one purpose only. Each vessel bristled with weapon systems. Energy cannons, missile pods, and devices the Kalani computers couldn't even identify. The ships themselves looked different from anything in the galactic database. Where most civilized species built elegant, curved vessels, these were angular and aggressive. It looked like they had been designed by predators. Commander Vortex whispered, "What are they?" Before Zeleth could answer, the communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent none of them recognized. "Kalani vessels, this is the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Please maintain your current positions while we handle the raiders, Terran." The word meant nothing to any of them. But as they watched, a mysterious fleet began to move toward the Vorthok raiders with deadly purpose. Admiral Hyanwu's face appeared on the main screen of the Kalani Command Center. And Commander Zeleth immediately understood why the galaxy had never heard of humans before, and the being looking back at him had predator's eyes. It's not the elegant, philosophical gaze of the Altarians or the careful, measured look of the Zenthari Council members. These were the eyes of something that had spent millions of years hunting. "Commander Zeleth," the human said, his voice calm despite the battle raging around them. "I'm Admiral Hyanwu of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We're here to assist with your raider problem." Zeleth tried to process what he was seeing. The human looked remarkably similar to several species in the galaxy. But there was something different about the way he held himself. Every movement seemed calculated, efficient. Behind him, the bridge of the human ship buzzed with activity, but it was controlled chaos. No panic, no fear, just professional determination. "Admiral, we're grateful for your assistance," Zeleth replied carefully. "But I must ask, what is your species' relationship with the Galactic Council? We have no record of Terra or humans in our databases." Double quotes, Huan Wu's expression didn't change. "We prefer to keep a low profile. But when we hear about civilians being threatened, we respond. Vorthok raiders are about to discover why that's a mistake." As if summoned by his words, tactical displays throughout the Kalani Command Center lit up with impossible readings. The human ships were launching weapons unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. Instead of elegant energy beams that most civilized species used, these were crude, brutal kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. "What are those?" Vortex asked, pointing at the display. "Kinetic kill vehicles," Huan Wu explained matter-of-factly. "Depleted uranium rods accelerated to relativistic speeds. Very effective against shields and armor. We also have nuclear warheads, antimatter torpedoes, and several other options depending on the situation." The Kalani officers exchanged shocked glances. Nuclear weapons had been banned by galactic treaty for 3 centuries. They were considered too destructive, too indiscriminate. Civilized species fought with precision energy weapons that could disable enemy ships without unnecessary casualties. Admiral Zeleth said carefully, "Are you aware of the Galactic Warfare Convention? The use of nuclear weapons against sentient beings is considered a war crime." Huan Wu's smile was cold. "Command of the Vorthok are currently trying to murder 3 million of your civilians. They lost their right to civilized treatment the moment they opened fire on non-combatants. We don't recognize any authority that would prevent us from protecting innocent lives." On the tactical display, the first human weapons struck the Vorthok fleet. The elegant raider ships, built for speed and intimidation, began exploding in brilliant flashes. The humans weren't trying to disable or capture. They were systematically destroying every raider vessel they could target. This is not how galactic warfare is conducted, Zeleth protested weakly. "This isn't warfare," Huan Wu replied. "This is pest control. The Vorthok have been raiding civilian populations for decades, while the great powers debate proper response protocols. We don't debate, we act." Another wave of human weapons struck the raider fleet. The Vorthok ships, which had seemed so terrifying minutes before, were being torn apart by weapons that seemed designed for only one purpose: complete destruction of the enemy. There was no honor in it, no elegance. It's just efficient, overwhelming violence. Commander Huan Wu continued, "Your people are safe, but I suggest you remember this moment. Humanity has been watching the galaxy for quite some time. We've seen how civilized species respond to threats. Today you're seeing how we respond." War Chief Krextel had raided 47 systems in his lifetime. He knew the patterns of galactic warfare like a master craftsman knew his tools. The prey species would send their elegant ships, announce their intentions over open channels, and engage in the ritualized combat that had defined civilized warfare for millennia. Today should have been no different. His fleet of 200 vessels surrounded the mining colony like a closing fist. The Vorthok had perfected this dance. Over centuries, strike fast, overwhelm the defenders, take what they wanted, and leave before the major powers could respond. The distress call had been sent hours ago, and the relief fleet had finally arrived. It was time to teach these newcomers how the galaxy really worked. War Chief, his tactical officer, reported, "The relief fleet is larger than expected. 100 vessels, unknown configuration." Krextal laughed, the sound echoing through his command chamber. 800 ships. These fools brought a battle fleet to fight raiders. They clearly don't understand the rules of engagement. Signal the fleet. We'll show them how civilized species conduct warfare. The Vorthok ships moved into their traditional formation, shields gleaming as they powered up their weapons. This was how it had always been done. The two forces would face each other, exchange formal challenges, and then engage in honorable combat. Winners would claim salvage rights, losers would surrender with dignity and tact, but the human fleet didn't respond to the formal challenge. They didn't announce their intentions or demand surrender. Instead, they simply opened fire. The first salvo was unlike anything Krextall had ever experienced. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, solid projectiles struck his ships at impossible speeds. The Vorthok's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, offered no protection against chunks of metal moving at near-light velocity. 3 of his finest raiders simply ceased to exist, torn apart by impacts that released more energy. Then small stars? What are they firing at us? Krextall demanded, his confidence wavering. 8 kinetic projectiles. War Chief. Solid matter accelerated to relativistic speeds. Our shields can't stop them. Before Krextall could respond, the tactical display lit up with new contacts. The humans weren't just using ship-based weapons. They were launching something else entirely. Asteroids captured from the system's belt and accelerated to devastating speeds. It began raining down on the Vorthok formation. This is impossible, Krextall snarled. No civilized species uses such crude weapons. Where is their honor? Where are their formal battle declarations? His answer came in the form of a human voice, cutting through his communication channels. Vorthok vessels. This is Captain Minho of the TES Retribution. You have 30 seconds to cease hostilities and surrender, or we will destroy every ship in your fleet. Krextall was outraged. You dare threaten the Vorthok clans? You're warriors of the old blood. Follow the ancient codes of battle. Your 30 seconds are up, the human captain replied calmly. What followed was not a battle. It was extermination. The humans deployed weapons that the Vorthok had never imagined. Antimatter warheads that consumed entire ships in brilliant flashes, and nuclear torpedoes that turned proud raiders into expanding clouds of radioactive debris. Gravity bombs that crushed vessels into dense metal spheres. The Vorthok tried to fight back. But their elegant energy weapons seemed pitiful against the human onslaught. Their honor-based formations crumbled as ships fled in every direction. Abandoning centuries of military tradition in favor of simple survival, the humans pursued them like wolves chasing scattered prey, methodically destroying every vessel they could catch. Fall back, Krextall ordered, his voice cracking with fear. Signal the clan fleets.
Alvin.
Why lie we lie?
Something that doesn't follow the rules. But even retreat was impossible. The humans had surrounded the entire system with their weapons, turning it into a killing field. Asteroids continued to rain down, while human warships hunted down fleeing raiders with ruthless efficiency. This wasn't warfare as the galaxy understood it. This was pest control. As his own ship shuddered under human fire, Krextall realized the terrible truth. The humans didn't see this as a glorious battle between warriors. They saw it as a problem to be solved, and they were solving it with overwhelming violence and complete disregard for civilized conventions. The age of honorable warfare was over. When the human fleet finally reached Zephyrian space, everyone watching held their breath. What they saw was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed before. These weren't the polished, smooth ships that most civilizations used for exploration or trade. These weren't the beautiful, curved vessels that looked more like art pieces than war machines. Instead, the human ships looked like floating fortresses. They were massive, angular, and covered in weapons from front to back. Every surface seemed to have some kind of gun, missile launcher, or energy weapon attached to it. The ships looked like they had been built by people who expected to fight for their lives every single day. The alien observers couldn't believe what they were seeing. These weapon systems seemed to break the rules of physics that everyone else followed. Where other species had elegant solutions, humans had brute force. Where others had efficiency, humans had overwhelming firepower. It was as if they had taken every weapon they could think of and somehow made it work together. But what shocked the aliens even more was watching the human crews prepare for battle, while other species would spend weeks planning and worrying about dangerous missions. The humans treated it like just another day at work. They checked their weapons, reviewed their battle plans, and prepared for what could easily be suicide missions with the same calm attitude someone might use to check their shopping list. The human soldiers didn't seem afraid of dying. They didn't panic or hesitate when facing impossible odds. Instead, they moved with practiced efficiency, like they had done this countless times before. Every movement was deliberate. Every action had purpose. They weren't reckless or crazy. They were professionals who had trained for exactly this kind of situation. Admiral Park stepped forward to address the gathered representatives from across the galaxy. Her voice was steady and professional, showing no sign of the fear or excitement that other species might feel before such a massive undertaking. She spoke like someone delivering a routine military briefing, not someone about to lead what could be the most dangerous mission in galactic history. She explained that humanity had been preparing for threats like this since the day they first left Earth behind. They had learned early that the universe was not a friendly place. While other species had developed in relative safety, humans had grown up on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them. They had faced ice ages, natural disasters, diseases, and countless other challenges that had shaped them into survivors. This experience had taught them that the universe was fundamentally hostile. They couldn't rely on luck or hope that problems would solve themselves. Instead, they had built their entire civilization around the idea that someday something would try to destroy them completely. Every ship was designed to fight against impossible odds. Every soldier was trained to face threats that could wipe out entire worlds. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They had prepared for extinction. And now, finally, they were ready to put that preparation to the test. The battle was reaching its peak when something unexpected happened. Several Vorthok ships, battered and broken, began sending surrender signals. Their weapons powered down, their shields dropped, and they transmitted the universal message of defeat. For a moment, the entire battlefield seemed to pause as everyone processed what was happening. This created a problem that no one had anticipated. The humans, who had been fighting with terrifying efficiency just moments before, suddenly found themselves facing a choice that would reveal something deeper about their nature. They could easily destroy these surrendering ships. After all, the Vorthok had shown no mercy to countless civilizations before. It would be simple, quick, probably safer in the long run. But the humans stopped firing. The alien observers watched in fascination as the human fleet commanders engaged in rapid communications. They could see the internal struggle playing out in real time. These were the same warriors who had been unleashing devastating firepower without hesitation. Yet now they were debating what to do with defeated enemies. The Kalani representatives were particularly intrigued by this display. They had expected the humans to be simple destroyers, creatures of pure violence who knew only how to kill. Instead, they were witnessing something far more complex. The humans were bound by rules that they carried with them, even into the darkest moments of war. Despite having the power to obliterate entire fleets, the humans followed strict codes about how they could and couldn't fight. They had regulations about protecting civilians, rules about treating prisoners, and guidelines about accepting surrender. These weren't suggestions or loose principles. They were absolute laws that every human warrior was expected to follow, even when it might cost them their lives. The human fleet commanders spent precious minutes verifying that the surrenders were genuine. They checked for tricks, scanned for hidden weapons, and confirmed that the Vorthok ships were truly defeated. All the while, they kept their weapons ready, but did not fire. They were giving their enemies a chance to live, even though those same enemies had never shown such mercy to others. When the humans finally responded, their message was clear and direct. They would accept the surrender, but with conditions that left no room for misunderstanding. Any attempt at betrayal, any hidden attack, any sign of deception would result in immediate and complete destruction. The surrendering ships would be taken as prisoners. Their crews would be treated according to human military law. They would face justice for their crimes. But the humans made one thing absolutely clear. This mercy was not weakness. They weren't sparing these ships because they couldn't destroy them. They were sparing them because their own principles demanded it. However, if those principles were violated, if the surrendering enemies tried to take advantage of human compassion, then those same humans would show no hesitation in delivering complete annihilation. The galaxy watched as humanity revealed its most complex trait. They were capable of incredible violence, but they were also capable of incredible restraint. They could be destroyers or protectors, depending on the situation and their own moral code. While the human fleet was busy tearing apart the Vorthok ships with ruthless efficiency, their intelligence teams were hard at work behind the scenes. They weren't just fighting, they were learning. Every destroyed enemy vessel was scanned, every piece of wreckage was analyzed, and every communication signal was intercepted and decoded. What they discovered changed everything. The human intelligence. Officers began piecing together a picture that made their blood run cold. This wasn't the massive invasion force that everyone had feared. This wasn't the full might of the Vorthok Empire coming to conquer the galaxy. Instead, what they had just demolished was essentially a scouting party. The Vorthok had sent this fleet as a test. They wanted to see how the galaxy would respond to their aggression. They were checking the defenses, measuring the resistance, and gathering information about what kind of fight they could expect when they returned with their real army. This attack on the Kalani wasn't meant to be a conquest. It was meant to be a gentle probe to see what the galaxy was capable of. The humans realized they had just answered that question in the most dramatic way possible. What the Doc had intended as a minor scouting mission had been met with the full force of human military might. The humans had treated this probe like a serious threat and responded accordingly. They had brought their most advanced ships, their most skilled crews, and their most devastating weapons to deal with what the enemy considered a small exploratory force. The implications were staggering. If this was just a tiny fraction of Vorthok strength, then the real invasion force would be massive beyond imagination. But more importantly, the humans had just announced to the entire galaxy and to the Vorthok Empire that Earth's children were not going to be pushed around. The human response had been so overwhelming, so complete, and so terrifyingly effective that it sent a clear message across the stars. Any species that threatened human allies would face consequences that went far beyond what anyone expected. The humans hadn't just defended the Kalani, they had made a statement that would echo throughout the galaxy. The Kalani representatives watched all of this unfold with growing amazement. They had initially thought they were witnessing a rescue mission. Then they realized they were seeing a military demonstration. Now they understood they were watching history being made. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, and most people didn't even realize it yet. The humans had revealed themselves as a force that could stand against threats that other civilizations couldn't even imagine facing. They had shown that they were willing to fight not just for themselves, but for their allies as well. But perhaps, most importantly, they had proven that when humans said they would protect someone, they meant it absolutely. The Vorthok had expected to test the galaxy's defenses and found instead that they had awakened something that would change everything. The humans had accidentally announced their arrival on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. And now, everyone would be watching to see what they would do next. After the battle was over, and the Vorthok threat had been eliminated, Admiral Jinwoo called together the representatives from various alien species. What he was about to reveal would shake their understanding of humanity to its very core. The aliens had assumed they were dealing with a single aggressive species that had recently discovered space travel. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The Admiral activated a massive holographic display that filled the entire briefing room. What appeared before them wasn't a map of Earth, or even the local solar system. Instead, it showed a vast network of star systems stretching across the outer rim of the galaxy. Each point of light represented something that shouldn't have been. Possible human colonies, dozens of them, be hundreds. The alien representatives stared in stunned silence as the true scope of human expansion became clear. These weren't recent settlements or experimental outposts. These were fully developed worlds, each one fortified and defended, according to what the Admiral called Deathworld specifications. Every single colony had been built as if it expected to come under attack at any moment. The humans had been busy. While the galaxy wasn't paying attention, they had been spreading quietly through the outer rim, establishing themselves on worlds that other species had deemed too dangerous or too difficult to colonize. Planets with extreme weather, hostile wildlife, or unstable geology were exactly what humans were looking for. These were the kinds of environments that reminded them of home. Each colony was connected to the others through a sophisticated network of communication relays and supply lines. They shared resources, information, and military support. What looked like scattered settlements were actually parts of a single, massive empire that had been growing in secret for decades. The defensive installations were particularly impressive. Every human world was protected by orbital weapons platforms, planetary shield generators, and ground-based defense systems that could repel invasion forces many times their size. The humans had learned from their homeworld that survival meant being prepared for the worst possible scenarios. Admiral Ginwu explained that humanity's violent homeworld had taught them lessons that other species had never needed to learn. They had spent thousands of years fighting against natural disasters, dangerous predators, and their own species. Conflicts. This had created a civilization that was naturally skilled at warfare, survival, and adaptation to hostile environments. The technology they had developed reflected this harsh upbringing. Their ships were built to withstand damage that would destroy vessels from other civilizations. Their weapons were designed to work in extreme conditions. Their soldiers were trained to fight in environments that would kill most other species within minutes. But perhaps most importantly, their entire strategic thinking was based on expecting the unexpected. They planned for threats that hadn't appeared, yet prepared for enemies they hadn't met, and built defenses against attacks they could only imagine. This wasn't paranoia. It was practical survival strategy learned through millennia of living on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. The colony representatives realized they were witnessing something historic. First aliens to be saved by humans, they were among the first to see the true scope of what humanity had become. The galaxy had been assuming they were dealing with a single aggressive species, but they were actually looking at a rapidly expanding interstellar empire with capabilities that no one had fully understood until now, 3 days after the last. Vorthok's ship had been destroyed. The human diplomatic corps arrived at Kalani Prime. Their ships were sleek and professional, a stark contrast to the massive war vessels that had just saved the planet. But the Kalani were beginning to understand that, with humans, appearances could be deceiving. The human diplomats were polite, well-dressed, and spoke in calm, measured tones. They brought gifts, expressed sympathy for the Kalani losses, and praised the courage shown during the crisis. Everything seemed perfectly normal for a first-contact diplomatic mission. But as the negotiations began, the Kalani quickly realized they were dealing with a species that played by completely different rules. The human negotiators listened patiently as Kalani officials explained the galaxy's complex political structure. They nodded politely when told about the elaborate treaties that defined territorial boundaries. They seemed interested when hearing about the careful balance of power that had kept peace for centuries. But when it came time for the humans to respond, their attitude became clear. They didn't care about any of it. The humans viewed the galaxy's political system like adults watching children play with toy soldiers. It was cute, it was elaborate, and it probably made everyone feel important. But when real threats appeared, all those careful agreements and diplomatic protocols meant nothing. The Vorthok had proven that by ignoring every treaty and boundary the galaxy had established. The human-led negotiator laid out their position with startling directness. The galaxy was changing whether people wanted it to or not. The Vorthok were coming back, probably with a much larger force. When they did, All the political structures and territorial agreements wouldn't stop them from destroying every civilization they encountered. The humans offered the colony a choice, but it wasn't really much of a choice at all. They could join humanity's expanding sphere of protection and benefit from human military might, technology, and strategic expertise. Or they could remain independent and face the next Vorthok invasion alone. The colony negotiators tried to find a middle ground. They proposed limited cooperation agreements, mutual defense pacts, and shared intelligence arrangements. They wanted the benefits of human protection without giving up their independence. But the humans made it clear that protection came with expectations. If the colony wanted human ships to defend their worlds, they would need to accept human military advisors. If they wanted access to human technology, they would need to follow human safety protocols. If they wanted to be part of the human alliance, they would need to contribute to the common defense. The humans weren't asking for surrender or demanding submission. They were offering partnership, but it was partnership on human terms. They had proven they could protect their allies, but they expected those allies to be worth protecting. This meant meeting human standards for military readiness, technological development, and strategic planning. The colony found themselves in an impossible position. They wanted to maintain their independence and their traditional way of life, but they also wanted to survive the next Vorthok attack. The humans were offering them survival, but the price was becoming something more than they had been before. As the negotiations continued, it became clear that humanity wasn't just offering protection, they were offering transformation. The galaxy was about to change, and the only question was whether civilizations would change with it or be left behind. 6 months had passed since the Vorthok attack. The changes to Kalani Prime were impossible to ignore. What had once been a peaceful world focused on art, philosophy, and gentle commerce had become something entirely different. The planet now bristled with defensive installations, orbital weapons platforms, and military training facilities that would have been unthinkable before the humans arrived. Commander Zeleth stood on the observation deck of the new planetary defense center, watching the latest group of Kalani civilians complete their mandatory military training. These were poets, teachers, and merchants who were now learning to handle weapons designed on humanity's violent homeworld. The transformation was remarkable and slightly terrifying. The human military advisors had been thorough in their work. They hadn't just installed better weapons and stronger shields. It completely redesigned how the Kalani thought about survival. Every civilian now knew basic combat techniques. Every building had been retrofitted with emergency shelters. Every communication system had military-grade encryption and backup protocols. The technology upgrades were the most visible changes. Human engineers had replaced the colony's elegant but fragile infrastructure with systems built to withstand direct assault. The power grid could continue functioning even if major sections were destroyed. The transportation network had redundant pathways that could reroute around damaged areas. Even the civilian hospitals had been upgraded to handle mass casualties in biological warfare. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Kalani people themselves. They moved with more purpose now, spoke with greater urgency, and approached problems with a pragmatic efficiency that would have seemed foreign to them before. They were becoming more like their human protectors without even realizing it. Commander Zeleth had been appointed as the primary liaison between the two species, and the role had given him a unique perspective on humanity's expansion. He watched as more human fleets arrived each week, establishing permanent bases throughout Kalani space. Each new installation was positioned with careful strategic planning, creating overlapping fields of fire and mutual support networks. The humans weren't just protecting the Kalani, they were transforming their entire region of space into an extension of human military doctrine. Every base, every patrol route, every communication relay was designed according to the harsh lessons learned on humanity's Deathworld. The result was a defensive network that could withstand attacks that would have overwhelmed any traditional galactic civilization. News of these changes had finally reached the galaxy's major powers, ancient civilizations that had ruled known space for millennia were beginning to take notice of humanity's rapid expansion. Diplomatic missions were being planned, intelligence networks were being activated, and emergency sessions were being called in the great council chambers of the core worlds. But Commander Zeleth knew something that these ancient powers were only beginning to understand. The time for stopping humanity's expansion had already passed. While the galaxy's leaders had been focused on their traditional politics and careful diplomatic protocols, the humans had been quietly building an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. The humans had revealed themselves not when they were weak and vulnerable, but when they were already strong enough to defend their position. They had shown their hand only after ensuring they had the capability to protect what they had built. By the time the galaxy's great powers realized what was happening, humanity was already too established to be easily displaced. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.